Hey there, everybody. How's it going? It's the Fizz was here. This video is not going to be how I originally envisioned it. Um, my original plan was to play all three Dark Souls games, record them, write up a script, record the script, and then edit all three of them into one video. Uh, and that's simply just not going to happen because I'm just about finished with the base editing of the video here that you're watching, and it has taken me forever to get this video done. Like just this first section, and the other two sections aren't going to be as long, but they are still going to be pretty damn long. If I had to guess, this video I think is going to be roughly like an hour and a half, maybe a little bit longer, maybe a little bit shorter. Um, and the other videos or the other sections are I'm probably going to roughly say they'll probably be about 40 minutes each, maybe. Maybe a little bit longer, maybe a little bit shorter. Not certain. But what I'm actually gonna do is originally this was supposed to be one video containing all three Dark Souls games. So what we're gonna do instead is I'm going to finish editing this video, and I'm going to go ahead and put this video out, which is why I'm recording this here. And instead, what's gonna happen is I'm going to do the same thing with the other two parts of the video. I'm gonna edit together in part 2, and I'm gonna release it as soon as it's done, and then I'm gonna edit together part 3 and release it as soon as it's done. And then once I'm done with all of that, I will go back and I will recompile them into a trilogy, like a single episode, as well as add some additional editing, some additional content. That way this video can be as I envisioned it originally. So you'll have to look forward to that. Unfortunately, this just isn't how I wanted the video to look originally, but I'm still going to make the video that I wanted to. This is by far the biggest project I've ever worked on in terms of like video editing and stuff like that, solo, like by myself. So yeah, I kind of just bit off a little bit more than I could chew, but I still want to get it done. I still want to finish it because I really enjoyed my time with these games, and I really wanted to put these videos out because it was a challenge that I had set for myself. It's just I realized at some point in time I gotta split the workload a little bit. So enjoy part 1. As soon as I finish editing this and as soon as I get it uploaded, I'm going to be immediately hopping into Dark Souls 2, the editing of that video. So thank you for watching. I would very, very much appreciate it if you were to, like and subscribe and stuff. Normally I don't ask for that kind of stuff, but I have worked really hard on this video, and I'm planning on putting the same amount of effort in the other two videos, so please share it if you like it. Like it if you like it, and maybe, subscribe and stuff. So, All right, thank you and enjoy. I decided to go with the warrior class. A very basic bitch class, I know, but this was the first game of the series, and I usually play rogue or arcane trickster type builds with these types of games, so I wanted to shake it up and see how the game was built around its most basic starting class. The Northern Undead Asylum is quite a small area. You wake up to a knight dropping a corpse with a key attached to it in your cell. I can't help but wonder who this is and why he did this. Anyway, I escaped the cell and began my first steps into Dark Souls 1. Real quick, given this game was the blueprint for all future Soulsborne games, I already knew how to play from the start. But I still love these little messages littering the floor. It may not be very diegetic in terms of tutorials, but I still like how it teaches the player to interact with messages that they see on the floor. Help them out, as player messages are a core part of the Soulsborne games. A tiny tangent aside, let's move on. Given the small selection of the few FromSoft games I have played, I'm used to a massive bulking enemy coming in and wrecking my shit 20 seconds into the game, so seeing the Asylum demon come out of nowhere as I walked into a massive open room was no surprise to me at all. What I wasn't expecting was for the game to open an escape route for me, intending for me to take it in order to better equip myself. Once fully equipped, I got smacked in the face by Yo Mama before hearing the wall behind me break open. I may have heard someone use that joke before, so I apologize if I stole it. I met with an injured knight who looks a lot like the knight who saved us earlier. It may just be a coincidence, though. He gave me my orange juice, and I was on my way. with this new weapon in hand, I was able to take on the Asylum Demon, defeating it in a single try. Not sure if it was meant to be this easy as a way of showcasing how obtaining equipment and going stronger function in this game, or if my history with much later games helped trivialize this boss. Either way, it was pretty cool. Firelink Shrine is a cozy little hub area which connects to multiple different areas within the world of Dark Souls. I wasn't long before I discovered that NPCs that I come across and help throughout the world eventually make their way back here, sometimes as simple passerbys and other times as shopkeepers. One of the NPCs tells me that I need to ring 2 bells for some reason. One bell is up high and another bell is down low. This seems like super important information, so I'm certain I will make sure to lock this information away as a core memory, just so I won't forget it. Undeadburg is of course the first place that I went to. The city streets and undead rampant rooftops seemed twisted and winding at first, although it didn't take me very long to get things figured out. Getting used to the controls was a bit of a hassle, as this was a rather cramped place to be swinging a big sword in. Not every area within it is cramped, of course, but the game does make it a point to make sure I'm not comfortable with my surroundings. I was shocked to see a fog wall almost immediately, though. My history with the series teaching me that fog walls meant imminent death and despair. I made sure I was prepped and ready, exploring what I was comfortable with in the surrounding area before traversing the fog wall, only to find a room with virtually nothing in it. This was a bit of a shock to me at first. Thinking I was just being tricked, I walked up the stairs and out the door, expecting the worst, and for a moment, I believed I was right. A massive dragon sweeps by, bellowing fire and destroying the surrounding area. I thought I'd be in for a fight, only to realize the dragon had flown away and didn't return. It was then I realized that the conditioning that future FromSoft games had put me under concerning fog walls didn't always apply in Dark Souls 1. Part of me felt relieved, but the other part of me felt even more nervous. I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of mixed on this. On one hand, for a first-time player who has never played a Soulsborne game before, this fog wall is like Schrodinger's cat. They wouldn't know what's on the other side until they observe it. Sometimes it's nothing, other times it's a boss. It helps build tension as you never know what you're in for as you step through that fog. On the other hand though, once you discover that some fog walls lead to bosses while others don't, it might cause players to over-prepare or become paranoid with each and every fog wall they walk through. While it is nice to have that tension built, it feels mean more than anything else to psych a player out and cause them to consume resources that they may not have needed to. If a fog wall acts as nothing more than a door in certain cases, then why not just replace it with a door? You can still put big surprises behind doors. I think FromSoft caught on to this, as to my knowledge, both Bloodborne and Elden Ring eventually did away with this confusion entirely. Anyway, I find a second bonfire a bit of the ways in, and I end up grinding in the area for a bit, as well as doing some exploring, as I wanted to familiarize myself with the area. It's also here that I mess around the humanity system a little. I discovered that becoming human makes me look normal for one, while also increasing my health, and I think a few of my other stats. I also discovered that being human invites other players into my world who want nothing more than to introduce my rectum to something sharp and shiny. So, needless to say, I didn't become human throughout the rest of this run. It turns out I didn't really need it much anyway. After bumbling about for a bit, I eventually climbed some stairs and came across yet another fog wall. Not thinking too much about it, I walked through and found myself on a long bridge. I then turned around and noticed that fog wall hasn't disappeared, and I soon realized this was a boss arena. The Taurus Demon. He looked huge. He looked scary. He looked strong and... what? Did you expect me to quickly cut to the boss's death and claim that I beat him first try without any issues? No way. This was the first boss I actually died multiple times to. The first time I fought this guy, I didn't realize that there were archers behind me sniping away at my health until it was far too late. It took a few tries, but I made sure that with each attempt, I'd clear out the 2 arches before fighting the demon. Eventually, I claimed victory. This boss was a bit of a challenge though. Although I will say that some of the hitboxes on this boss are questionable. This is also the first boss where I encountered my first bug. I don't have footage of it, but during my second or third attempt, I didn't die because the boss depleted my health or anything. I died because the boss hit me across the entire continent and I fell off the map. I couldn't even get mad, to be honest. It was hilarious. After beating the Taurus demon, I met the legend Solaire for the first time. I can kinda see why the fan base gravitated to this man. He's so silly and nice. Definitely the most polite and helpful entity I've met in the game so far. But the pleasantries didn't last long as I walk up to a bridge only to come across a massive dragon which flew by, demolishing every enemy in its wake and perching itself up on the opposing gate. I actually kinda saw this coming, but I still ended up getting hit my first time anyway. Luckily, there was a route leading underneath the bridge as well as a shortcut which also connected to the previous bonfire before the Taurus demon. I love the interconnectedness of these games. Although, now that I think about it, it doesn't really seem to make sense geographically speaking. I'd have to look back through my footage and look though. Regardless, I make my way under the bridge, kill some undead and some rats, before making my way up to the other side of the gate. I cleared out all of the undead in the area and fisted a boar. Gross. Before managing to slowly make my way to what I think is a chapel. After fighting my way through some knights and making my way across a bridge, I met Andre, one of the best characters to ever exist in a Soulsborne game. I level up my weaponry a bit before turning around and making my way back to the chapel. I fight this big-ass knight before hopping into an elevator and discovering a shortcut back to Firelink Shrine. Now this is really nice, as the bonfire in Firelink actually gives me 5 extra flasks to work with in my travels. So I ended up working out of this bonfire for the upcoming challenge. But before that, I make my way back to the chapel, fight an absolute crap ton of undead, and kill this weird wizard guy before exploring around the area. I came across a damaged wall and wondered if I could break through it. My curiosity was rewarded, and I came across a knight clad in gold trapped in a cell. He asked for my help, and I used a key that I had come across earlier to open the door and set him free. He thanked me, but told me he wouldn't be able to reward me until later. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but something about this man seemed kinda off. I shrugged it off though and left him to his own devices. I make my way back through the chapel, up some ladders, and through another fog gate. The Bell Gargoyles. The first ever gate boss in a Soulsborne game. Or so I thought. A comment on one of my previous videos ranking the Dark Souls bosses enlightened me of the fact that Demon Souls does in fact have a gank boss, so thank you for that. You should check that video out, by the way. These guys are much more agile than previous bosses in the game. It's pretty interesting for a fight. Their attacks are decently well telegraphed, although I do have some issues tracking them when they're flying, even when I'm not locked on. I like how the second gargoyle doesn't join the fight until the first one is around half health. It's a nice difficulty progression that allows you to get used to one difficult foe and make decent headway into defeating them, before upping the stakes and throwing a second one at you. Neither one are too aggressive, so it's not like you're constantly being hunted either. Something I definitely can't say for a certain boss later on. It took me a couple of tries, but I managed to beat them. I cut the first one's tail off, dealing massive damage and rewarding me with a weapon that I can't use. It's an interesting mechanic, searching out a boss's weak point, getting a bit risky with your advances, and being rewarded with extra damage and a new weapon. I kind of wish this mechanic was still around. Either way, I climbed up these weirdly long ladders, at which point I was really wishing I could climb faster like in future titles. After that, I rang the first bell and mentally readied myself for whatever the game had waiting for me next. Making my way back down the ladders, like, fuck! God damn! This guy scared the hell out of me. I'm really not sure what service this guy provides. Something about his sins? I don't know. Maybe it's a mechanic that will get explained later on. I make my way back down to Andre to level up and cash in my rewards, and. Alright, I gotta level with you. All the footage you've been seeing up until now was footage from my New Game Plus run in the same build. You see, I didn't actually decide to make this challenge a video until after I beat the Bell Gargoyles, meaning I hadn't recorded my entire first playthrough. Up until now, I've been trying to recreate my first experience the best way that I could narratively using footage from my New Game Plus run. So, from now on, the footage you'll be seeing will be from my actual first playthrough, not New Game Plus. Also, I'll be going a little into less detail on what I did step by step because, in total, this game took longer than both of the other two games, and a good chunk of that was just me running around aimlessly trying to figure out what to do. So it'd be kind of boring if I just said, and then I went to X place and hit a brick wall and turned around over and over again until I eventually found a solution. That, and if I went into every single detail of my first run, we'd be here forever, and this script is already super long. Who knows how long this video will actually end up being. Anyway, I ended up going back and trying to fight that dragon on the bridge and being less than successful at it. Thinking about it, considering the opening cutscene made it clear that dragons are basically gone from this world, and based on how this thing actually looks, I want to say this is more of a wyvern than anything, isn't it? Regardless, I bumble about for a little bit, heading down and snooping around New Londo. I managed to grab some transient curses and fighting my way through these ghostly dudes before eventually kicking down a ladder, which I assume is a shortcut of some kind. I try to proceed further, making sure to be careful as I do, but eventually I come across a big-ass building full of ghosts, and I end up just turning around. Afterwards, I make my way back to Andre, head down, and fight this weird stone demon-looking thing, again, unsuccessfully, before heading into the Dark Root Garden. I ended up exploring this area as much as I could. It wasn't too difficult, although it was slowly whittling away at my resources. Eventually, I came across a massive Hydra with only about 2 flasks on my person. Against my better judgment, I decided to fight it. Usually, decisions like this almost always end badly for me. You see, I like to consider myself a jinx. My luck can and will flip on a dime and can never be trusted. I'm either the luckiest person in the world, or I'm not. But this time, Lady Luck came down and revealed her glorious self to me as I actually managed to kill the Hydra on my very first try. Eventually, I go back to restock my flasks before making my way up a bit deeper into the garden before coming across the Moonlight Butterfly and proceeded to die. This boss would have been incredibly annoying, basically asking you to perfectly dodge all of its attacks before waiting around just for it to decide to make itself vulnerable to melee attacks. But lucky for me, I had a longbow and a stock of arrows, so I managed to take it down with relative ease on my third attempt or so. I climb the tower, grab a bunch of random crap from what used to be a smith, I believe, before making my way back once again to restock. I did come across a strange door, though. I'll have to figure out how to open it later. I explore the lower parts of the garden, having to fight this big-ass knight about 2 times before it went down, and eventually I came across a bonfire, which led down to a place called Valley of the Drakes. I attempted to fight one of the drakes, and then failed, and then decided I didn't really want to explore this place. I ran back to grab my souls, headed up to the garden once again, and came across a gate to a tower that I couldn't open earlier. I suppose I must have picked up a key atop the tower after fighting the butterfly. Not gonna lie, I wasn't really paying attention at that part. I walked into the tower, fight this big-ass man in a fuck ton of armor, and immediately died. I can tell by his moveset that he's not a normal knight enemy, he's a player NPC type character. Anyway, I make my way up the stairs, avoiding the heavy man, and making my way into the Undead Burg again. Interesting. I pop out right next to the Taurus Demon Bridge, and I make my way across with this husky man still chasing me for some reason. This is some Dark Souls 2 level dedication by the enemies, I swear. Anyway, I came across this door that I couldn't open before going through and heading down. I fight some dogs and these weird assassin guys in this little village area. I snoop around before eventually coming across a shortcut back to Firelink once again, as well as an undead shopkeep. I bum around for a bit before returning to the fog wall I had seen earlier and making my way through it. I was surprised to see the Capra Demon here. I've heard a lot of bad things about this boss, but I actually beat it on the first try. I want to chalk this up to my build though, so if I may break the fourth wall for a bit, I actually decided to do a second playthrough of this game with a different build not long after beating it for the first time, and I can definitely say it was the build. The reach and attack combo of the short sword made dealing with the dogs an absolute breeze, which just left the demon on its own. I used a shorter weapon on the second playthrough, and it was pain incarnate trying to kill the dogs, especially when they move faster than you and can easily jump out of reach of your counterattacks. After the Copper Demon goes down, I get a key to a door which lets me go even deeper underneath the Undead Burg. I fight a buttload of undead and a butcher or two. I save a guy stuck in a barrel before coming across a maze of sewers. This place wasn't horrible to traverse, but it wasn't really fun either. The rats were pretty easy to fight, even the giant rat that makes all the rules. I managed to do a few easy jumps and explore lower and lower before eventually coming across basilisks. I hate these guys. Not to fight, of course, they're actually somewhat easy to fight. They just make me so uncomfortable to look at. But I snoop around, find a shortcut back to the bonfire, eventually coming across a locked gate to a fog wall. Interesting how locked doors are never too far from a boss, which gives you a key to said door. Making my way down some stairs, I can tell a boss fight is around the corner, just from the size of this arena. It just depends on what type of boss is in there. Of course, it was the Gaping Dragon. This guy makes me super uncomfortable to look at. I kinda hate it. I respect the design, but I also hate it. Anyway, the fight itself wasn't all that hard. It was a difficult fight, and I did feel like any mistake I made could have been my last, but I had managed to take down the boss on the second try. I take the key that the dragon dropped, open up a nearby gate, and I made my way down the ladder and into Lighttown. I did not like this place my first time here, or my second time, or the third time. Okay, I hate this place. I ended up being toxined almost immediately, and I had to rush back to my bonfire. Unsuccessfully. I did eventually make my way back down to Blighttown, and within a try or two, I did actually reach the first bonfire. I fucked around for quite a long while, trying my best not to die, although not really getting very far in that endeavor. I got killed by a weird, large bug thing that was on the wall and decided to quit for the day. After I came back, I explored deeper and deeper, slowly making progress before eventually deciding to make the worst decision of my life. I turned around and I went back up. I thought maybe I had made a mistake and went to an area that I wasn't ready to go to yet. I thought that maybe the game expected me to be at a higher level or something. It also didn't help that at this point in time, I had completely forgotten what my objective was. Yes, my ADHD brain had decided to just throw out the most crucial detail of this adventure, the fucking objective. I fucked around a lot, going from place to place, hitting brick wall after brick wall, not entirely sure what I was doing. Eventually, I decided to go somewhere that I had only heard horror stories about. The catacombs. I did actually attempt to come here before, but after getting my ass handed to me by the skeletons outside of the entrance long ago, I elected to turn around and come back later. But this time, I actually managed to get through quite easily, and before I knew it, I was knee deep in knee joints and other bony parts of the body. Now, I do have a bit of an obscured point of view about this place. I can 100% understand why so many new players or people who are just playing this blind may have had an issue with this place. It's crawling with skeletons, and while they are mildly annoying to fight, they really aren't all that big of a deal. Assuming they actually stay dead. Which they don't. The skeletons enjoy coming back from the dead a second or third or fourth time, and insist on talking to you about their sword's extended warranty. If it weren't for the fact that I had played Elden Ring before this and discovered the necromancer gimmick via one of the catacombs in that game, I would have been rightfully pissed about this place. But once you are aware that the necromancers exist and that by killing them you prevent the skeletons from respawning after death, your time with this place will get significantly easier. Anyway, I managed to reverse down further and further, slowly making progress at a pretty steady rate. I do catch a few deaths here and there, but I honestly can't be mad as most of the deaths were due to pretty comedic circumstances. I eventually make my way down only to discover my second blacksmith. I don't remember this guy's name, but I do know two things. He has a very funny voice, and he really does not like me being here. I like him. He's so silly. I step out of his workshop only to find skeleton wheels. God, fuck these guys so hard. These are just dog shit enemies. Such a cool idea, butchered by the most butt-fucking execution. Anyway, I beat them, explored around a bit more before eventually finding my way into this massive coffin and... Pinwheel's dead. Yeah, I killed him. Honestly, I don't think it's possible to make any more jokes about this boss. I think the Dark Souls community has made every possible joke about this poor guy. So, I'm actually gonna say something nice about him. Pinwheel is... Actually, you know what? I'm gonna break the fourth wall a little bit to compliment this boss. Pinwheel is a nice reprieve from the rest of this godforsaken catacombs. Yes, the catacombs were much easier on replays, and knowing what to do does make traversing this place significantly easier, which does lessen the impact of this reprieve, but just because you know what you're doing in the future playthroughs doesn't suddenly mean this place is fun on repeat playthroughs. And for a first-time playthrough having no clue what I was doing, it was actually nice knowing this easy boss waits at the end of this stupid fucking area. After Pinwheel comes Tomb of the Giants, which I couldn't do yet. I bashed my head against the wall multiple times here, before eventually giving up. I did decide to look up what I was supposed to do here, but realizing it was a late game area, so I decided to just turn around. I was already missing the immediate fast travel of future titles when I made the stupid decision to leave Blighttown. But having to go back to the catacombs again was when the fatigue really hit me. Getting back to Firelake Shrine, I decided to suck it up and look up what I had to do next. Eventually, my brain decided to dig up the memories of my objective as I remembered what my goal really was. I had to ring 2 bells. One bell was up above, and one bell was down below, which is incredibly unhelpful. I'll explain why here in a minute. So, to come clean real quick, I kinda lied when I said I looked up where to go next. I actually looked up how to unlock fast travel because I was tired of walking everywhere on foot. The internet told me I needed to talk to this woman in this place called Anor Londo. Well, how do you get to Anor Londo? You go to Sen's Fortress. Well, where's Sen's Fortress? Well, it's the giant fortress with closed gates and the big onion man outside. I forgot to mention it before, but I did in fact come across this place. So the question was, how do I open the gate? You have to ring the 2 bells. And of course, guess where the second bell is? Fucking Blight Town. This actually really annoys me. As I said before, you were told that there's one bell upwards and one bell downwards. In the early parts of the game, there is only one way to go upward, by quite literally scaling the side of a cliff and up into Undead Burg. But there are multiple ways of going downward right from the very start. Obviously, there is the Catacombs and New Londo. It is kinda obvious that the game tries to funnel you down into Blighttown as each boss you fight in the Undead Burg drops a key leading to the next area that you have to go to. But considering the insane difficulty spike from the sewers to Blighttown, I would not be surprised if I'm not the first one to get confused as to where I had to go next. I'm not going to lie, I had a significantly easier time traversing and exploring the Catacombs than I did in Blighttown on my first try. And it wasn't even close. Some of that is, of course, because I had prior knowledge of the Necromancer gimmick, but that one gimmick is only one of many key components of the Catacombs difficulty. Alright, mini rant over. I sucked my own balls and dragged my lazy ass back down into Blighttown. It took quite a long while, but after attempt after attempt, I eventually made it to Quelaag, who proceeded to kick my ass. Afterwards, I crawled back down once again, and she beat me. And again. And again. At this point, I was beyond annoyed. My patience with this place was gone. I pulled out a map and I looked up where the second bonfire was located at. Part of my frustration was the fact that I didn't have this second bonfire lit, so I had to traverse through a majority of Blighttown over and over again. This wouldn't have been a problem if this second bonfire wasn't in a more secluded and hidden location. But finally, with the bonfire lit, I managed to crawl my way back to Quelaag and give it a few more tries. In total, I died to Quelaag about 5 to 6 times or so. And it was almost exclusively due to this one specific explosion attack that she can do, which would always one-shot me every single time. I don't even really mind this attack existing, to be honest. I just wish it had a little bit more of a wind-up time, with a slightly better tail and for it to do just slightly less damage. Overall, Quelaag isn't really that bad of a fight. She has a wide range of abilities, some that attack from a distance and cover the area with magma, and some that allow her to close the gap and make some close range attacks. This explosion is clearly just a move made to force the player to back off and give the boss some space. It's like a soft reset, forcing the player to return to neutral. I just don't know why it has to do so much fucking damage. Also, yes, she has tits. She's a naked woman. If I don't mention her design at least once, I'm certain someone will complain. Listen, I love women, and I don't have a problem with nudity or sexuality in video games at all, whether that be male or female. I hate spiders. I hate spiders so fucking much. If this does it for you, more power to you. I really don't care. But the only thing keeping me from setting this arachnid ablaze is the fact that she's immune to fire damage. Anyway, after many hours of playtime with Quelaag, I finally ring the second bell and decide to explore down below a little bit more. Almost immediately, I notice a player message near a wall, claiming the wall to be fake. So, here's the thing, if a player message tells me that the wall is fake, I'm gonna hit it. It's not about believing the message or falling for some stupid prank. It's about applying the scientific method. If someone makes a claim, I'm gonna test it. If it fails, shame on them for pulling pranks. If it succeeds, then that person has only done good for the world. In my opinion, the only failures here are the ones who fail others. Philosophy aside, it turns out I wasn't being pranked, and the wall was in fact fake. The floor message did not steer me wrong. Too bad I immediately ignored the next floor message and attacked the friendly NPC who looked exactly like some other enemies that I had killed before. Oops. Yep, anyway, I find another bonfire and I am relieved to see that this one has a firekeeper, meaning I get an additional 5 flasks. Hell yeah. I decided to push a bit deeper into the demon ruins before eventually coming across the ceaseless discharge, rather quickly in fact. At first I thought this guy looked absolutely disgusting, but for some reason over time, I began to find him kind of cute. I don't know, he's just a little silly guy I guess. Regardless, I tried to fight him a few times after grabbing this set of clothes, and it did not go very well at all. This is one of the very few times during this run where my brain conjured up images of a few challenge run videos I had seen in the past, prompting me to look this boss up only for me to find out that there is in fact an easier way of fighting it. Normally, I break down how I feel about individual bosses as I come across them, but this time I won't say too much, as using this easier method makes the boss a complete pushover. I will say that the few legitimate attempts I tried were really not fun whatsoever, as it really felt like a win or lose situation, where you either don't get hit at all, or you die immediately, which was not fun, like, at all. Regardless, I managed to kill the boss, which I guess lowered the backbone in the area, before deciding to turn around and head back up. The trek was long, and I was seriously wishing I had some form of fast travel, before eventually I made my way all the way back up through Blighttown and through the sewers before coming back across Firelink Shrine and into Sen's Fortress. This place feels like an actual test. I hated Blighttown due to the bullshit scenarios it forced a player into, and the Undead Burg just kind of felt like a difficult but fair starting area to the game. But if those two areas also felt somewhat like extensions to the actual tutorial in the Undead Asylum, then Sen's Fortress feels like an actual real test of the player's skills. The game was no longer holding my hand. I had to put on a brave face and push myself through what felt like a Zelda temple full of enemies, traps, twists, turns, and puzzles. It was hard and unforgiving, but it also felt pretty fair. It did feel kinda bullshit on this first playthrough, as there didn't seem to be any additional bonfires or shortcuts back to the beginning, but after completing the entire area, I went back and looked at a map only to find a hidden bonfire as well as a shortcut, which looped right back to the beginning. This giant throwing boulders around was very oppressive, but some basic observations taught me both the windows of opportunity to make a break for it, as well as the safe zones that I could stay in between cycles. Eventually, I climbed my way to the top of the fortress before coming across 3 paths. One blocked by a fog wall, which was most definitely indicating a boss, one path leading out across a bridge, and another path leading up some stairs. I was able to deduce that the path upward would lead to the giant on top of the tower, so I decided to run up there and take care of him first. It was a little bit of a sketchy fight, but I did take him down first try for some sweet revenge. With him out of the way though, it was finally time to take on the boss of Sen's Fortress. I was very afraid of the Iron Golem. Save for a few deaths near the beginning of the fortress, I had managed to travel through nearly the entire thing on a single life. My resources were depleted and I wasn't aware of any nearby shortcuts or bonfires, so I had to make the choice. Do I brave the fight with a single flask, or do I make the trip back down to the bonfire and try the fortress again with fewer mistakes? I ultimately decided to go forward with the boss and discovered he was actually kinda easy. Being able to get underneath him and wail away, occasionally dodging a few of his grounded swipes at me, made the encounter much easier than I thought it would be. I even managed to knock him down on his ass twice in the battle, allowing me a barrage of free hits. Apparently, this boss is much harder if you don't kill the giant in the tower before this, but I wasn't really aware of that. With the Iron Golem in pieces, I finally made my way into Anor Londo, And this place is just, wow. It being flown up into the air and hoisted over the wall, I knew that this view would stick with gamers for years to come. I had never watched anyone review this game before, so I knew very little about this place other than what I had looked up on the wiki. But I could just tell that this moment has probably become a benchmark for one of gaming's greatest moments. I could also tell that this right here is when Dark Souls 1 really begins. I finished the tutorial, the extended tutorials, and the final test forced upon me, and even a bit of the catacombs at this point. Now it was time for the real challenge to begin. And quite the challenge it was. Anor Londo does not pull its punches. Right away, one of the first enemies you encounter, not including the big-ass knights, is a fucking bell gargoyle. Luckily, it's just one of them, but I think this is the first instance in the game where Dark Souls 1 throws a previous boss at you as if it were a basic enemy. I take it down, explore around for a bit before catwalking my way over to a nearby building and entering inside through a broken window. Within the building, I came across a bunch of strange guys in robes who were clearly not happy to see me. I take them down before climbing up a ladder and... oh boy. Turns out this section is a lot less scarier than it looks. Assuming you have a ranged weapon on you, of course. I do manage to make my way through this area on my first try before coming across a weird mechanism which allows me to lift and drop this set of spiraling stairs. I make my way up and immediately have a heart attack as I was ambushed by yet another bell gargoyle. I take him down and decide to explore a little bit, heading down the stairs and into the lower area of the building that I was just in. I murder everything in sight and come across a few collectibles as well as this giant painting which I really don't pay too much mind to. Afterwards, I make my way back to the bonfire and take a moment to rest. Making my way back into the giant castle, this is the first area in the game where I really had a hard time progressing. These big-ass knights were a bitch to fight, and eventually I just resorted to running past them. The weird brain-looking demon bat things were mildly annoying, but not too difficult to deal with. That is until I came across the knights. Now, I had fought a few of them before, but this entire place is crawling with them. It took a few tries, but I did eventually make it across this gap and into the castle. I thought maybe there would be a moment of reprieve once I got inside, and I wasn't technically wrong, but this doesn't change the fact that almost every single enemy that exists here is either an Anor Londo Knight or a Mimic, which made progressing through this area very difficult. I did manage to make it through the interior of the castle my first try, however. I was relieved when I came across yet another blacksmith, as well as a shortcut back to the main bonfire. I would later learn on a future playthrough that there is in fact yet another bonfire within the castle, but I wasn't really aware of that fact during my first playthrough. On my way back to the blacksmith, I noticed a fog wall which immediately told me where my objective was. I would end up making a few trips back and forth from the main bonfire to the blacksmith as I tried a few times to get the main castle door opens before eventually succeeding in opening a straight path to the fog gate from the main bonfire. With Anor Londo mostly explored and completed, it was finally time that I took on Ornstein and Smo. I fucking hate this boss. Which is sad too, because it really is a well-designed boss fight. It just feels so overwhelming to fight them. Unlike the Bell Gargoyles, where you were introduced to one and have to mostly kill it before the other spawns in, and both gargoyles are pretty much identical in terms of attack patterns, this boss starts you off with both bosses at the same time, and they both have their own unique attack patterns, timings, and hitboxes. Now, I did do some research on this fight partway through my many attempts, and according to some internet people, these two bosses are supposedly designed to swap in and out, changing and altering aggro to help maintain a certain pace and allow for certain openings during the fight. Yeah, I call fucking bullshit. The amount of times I was ganked on by both bosses at the same time was fucking staggering. Some people claimed that using the broken pillars was the ideal way of staggering the boss attacks, allowing for more openings, and yeah, that does work. It feels more like an exploit rather than the intended method. You could argue that the boss fight is unfair with it being a 2v1, so leveling the playing field by exploiting the arena is fair game, and while I don't disagree with this statement, it makes the boss feel more video gamey, if that makes sense. Every single time I went into this fight, I got significantly closer to phase 2 each and every time I focused on Smoke first. I did eventually beat the boss by beating Ornstein first, followed by Super Snow, but it was such a pain. Ornstein is fast, he's slippery, and he isn't always that aggressive, and most importantly, he's small. Smo is large. He tended to be a lot more aggressive, and most importantly, he's the size of a fucking school bus. If you were to tell me to beat Ornstein first and fight Super Smo simply because Super Smo is the easier of the two to beat during Phase 2, I'd be totally fine with that. I'd even agree with you. But if you told me to fight Ornstein first because he was the easier to kill of the two, I'd take your opinion, drop it in the toilet, take a fat shit on it before flushing it down and never seeing it again. Alright, I'm done ranting about the boss. Ultimately, it's a decently well-designed boss. It's just not fun to fight whatsoever. I think people hype it up way more than it deserves. I wouldn't be surprised if it's as popular as it is for the spectacle and prestige, rather than the fight itself. Anyway, I honestly can't tell which of the boss rewards I enjoy more. No, not the weapon rewards. I meant between the fast travel or the big booby lady. Why is this castle full of chests that I want to smack with my sword? I took the fast travel back to Firelink Shrine to try and figure out what to do next, and, oh. Yeah. The bonfire's out, so, I ended up looking up how to fix it, and discovered that the bonfires that give you extra flasks are actually special types of bonfires, as they are maintained by a firekeeper. But if a firekeeper dies, then that bonfire becomes permanently disabled. I look up what to do and learned that I have to take this weird eye thing that I found back to Anor Londo and use it to invade the world of the firekeeper killer. I did so, only to find the Golden Knight guy I rescued all the way back in the Undead Burg's chapel. I knew he seemed kind of off, but I didn't expect to do something like this. Oh well. It took me a few tries, but I managed to kill him. I then took the Firekeeper's soul and revived the Firekeeper lady. With Firelink's bonfire back in working order, I come across some giant snake guy? I can't help but think that this guy looks like some kind of weird sci-fi creature ripped straight out of Star Wars. He updates me on my next mission and then eats me. Ugh. He drops me down into some weird new location where I set a giant bowl up on a pedestal. Doing so unlocked a bunch of doors, which thus begins the end game of my adventure. Okay, so I'm currently on page 19 of the script, and I still gotta edit my notes on one of the other two games. I'm doing this kind of out of order due to how I took my notes. I actually ended up writing the Dark Souls 2 portion of the script before the Dark Souls 1, and only recently have I finished writing up the Dark Souls 3 portion of it. So, altogether, the entire thing is like 69 pages long. I'm gonna start rapid firing my way through the rest of this before this goes on for any longer. I went around to try and push into some new directions which were now available to me, which also included going down to New Londo and lowering the water level before eventually going back to Darkroot Garden. Looking up how to open up the door in that area and face palming when I discover the key is being sold by Andre. I make my way deeper into the Darkroot, killing a bunch of random NPC-like enemies, some bush guys, and silly little mushroom dudes before coming across the best girl herself, Sif. The Sif fight is interesting. It didn't take me too many attempts, but it was a lot harder than I thought it would be. The internet told me the best method of fighting her was to get underneath her legs, which ultimately worked, but I wouldn't really say it was easier. A lot of her attacks still hit me when it felt like they really shouldn't have. Regardless, I regrettably had to put her down, which gave me a ring, which would also end up being pretty important later on. Once Sif was down, I made my way back to New Londo and finally finished this area up. I've only mentioned this place in passing throughout this video, never really going into detail, mostly because I would only ever come back to this place on occasion when I was either stuck or unsure of what I had to do next, just to kill time. But I can safely say that this is by far my least favorite location in this whole fucking game. Next to Blighttown, of course. These ghosts are just obnoxious. The nights are annoying. It's too fucking dark and gloomy, and overall, this place just does not kindle joy. You know what else doesn't kindle joy? The Four Kings. Luckily, I read a message on the floor to equip a certain ring, and I looked through my inventory and came across a ring that allowed me to, quote, traverse the abyss. Now, looking down at the giant hole in front of me, I put two and two together and figured I probably had to wear this ring if I didn't want to die here, so I equipped it. Now, on to the boss. I've heard some people describe this boss as a DPS check, and yeah, I can definitely agree. This boss is in fact a DPS check that I did not pass. Now, I've never actually looked at a map of this place, but to my knowledge, there are no bonfires here in New Londo. Meaning, each and every time I died to this boss, I had to run all the way back from Firelink. The boss itself is kinda annoying. In future playthroughs, I increased my DPS and poise by the time I got to the boss, so I was able to tank most of its attacks and just murder it before it could do anything to me. But on this first playthrough, fuck, this boss sucked. I was constantly getting hit by either lingering or janky-ass hitboxes. I, for the life of me, cannot dodge their grab attack. And the fact that more of them constantly spawn over time made this boss obnoxious. Being able to kill one before the other spawns is really the only way to make this boss semi-enjoyable, and by that point, you're already too powerful for the boss to provide any kind of challenge. With the first of the four required bosses down, I make my way back down to the Demon Ruins and began to push further and further into the hellscape. I kill a bunch of Capra demons, accidentally discover a bonfire, and then traverse a fog wall only to discover a fire sage demon. And immediately die right after. This boss is pretty much the asylum demon, but more annoying, as some of its attacks fucking explode for some reason. It's not a super hard boss, but the terrain makes it much more difficult than it really needed to be. I was always getting caught on something, or getting caught out by one of the exploding attacks. Ultimately, though, it only takes me 3 or so tries before the boss eventually goes down. Proceeding down further, I was actually surprised to find yet another boss. The centipede demon is actually a boss you can see right outside the boss room before you reach it, which is pretty neat. This guy looks really cool and is pretty unique in terms of bosses. It's just too bad that he's piss easy and went down without too much effort. I managed to cut his arm off in the middle of the fight, which was cool, but the fact that he can regrow it makes it even cooler in my opinion. I ended up getting confused as to how I was supposed to progress after this though, not having paid attention to the ring I had just gotten from this boss, which allows me to traverse magma, but once I figured it out, I made my way deeper into Lost Izalith. This place is weird. I make my way around the lava pools, trying my best not to aggro the weird feet things. Thanks to a message on the floor, I was able to find a hidden bonfire, making this next part significantly easier. Now, for some reason, I decided to go and fight Gwendolyn. If I had to guess, I probably looked up how many bosses existed in Dark Souls 1, saw Gwendolyn on the list, realized I missed a boss in Anor Londo, and decided to go back and kill him. It only took about 3 tries or so, but he was a pretty interesting boss, being more of a gimmicky puzzle-type boss more than a brawler, which was a pretty nice change of pace. That in the boss arena was really cool. Something about endlessly long hallways makes scenes so much more grandiose in scale to me. I can't really explain why. Anyway, back to Lost Izalith. I fumbled around for a bit, killing anything and everything that moved before exploring around and getting dropped into a poison pit, which really kind of pissed me off. Regardless, I decided to call those lost souls a lost cause before making my way to the Bed of Chaos. I struggle to call this a boss. It's really cool in theory, but in practice, it's one of the most annoying bosses I've ever had to fight in a video game, period. From the crumbling floors, to the sweeping attacks that knock you into them, to the pillars of bellowing fire. It's just a really bad time all around. I eventually had to look up a cheese method for fighting this boss, and luckily there was one involving using a bow and arrow, which I gladly abused. With that out of the way though, that's 2 out of the 4 bosses down. I make my way back to the catacombs and into the Tomb of the Giants. Earlier I wasn't sure what to do here as nothing I tried would illuminate the path forward. I did eventually discover that I had a skull lantern in my inventory, which I decided to use. It meant I didn't have access to a shield, but I suppose beggars can't be choosers. Although I will say not having a shield made this place an absolute shit show. I discovered later on that a helmet exists which can light up the Tomb of the Giants, allowing for your offhand to be free to be used for other things. And I really should have went with this route as the enemies in this place are fucking obnoxious, even with a shield. It took forever, but I did eventually make my way to Gravelord Nito. Nito is a cool boss. On paper. I love his design, and I love the arena you fight him in. I just hate all the fucking skeleton ads he spawns in. They aren't programmed to attack and back off alongside the boss. They just attack you like any other skeleton that you come across, which is really fucking annoying. Apparently you can use holy weapons to prevent the skeletons from respawning after death, but I didn't have one of those, so I was just fucked. Luckily, there is one attack Nito can do which will almost always wipe out all the skeletons in the area for a time that you can use to capitalize on. Assuming you don't get wiped out as well in the process. But once you pretty much ignore the skeletons, Nito isn't really all that hard. He does look really badass though. Making my way into the Duke's archives, I gotta say, I really hate these stupid fucking boars that sit at its entrance. It took way longer to kill them than I'd like to admit, but At least they don't respawn. The archives themselves are an interesting place. My only real problem with this place is just the amount of enemies that are crawling through these halls. Most of them aren't too difficult to deal with if you're careful, but the sheer amount of them makes this place way more tedious than fun. I was surprised at how quickly I came across Seath the Scaleless before dying whilst trying to figure out how to fight him. I was a bit upset that I died at first before realizing I didn't spawn where I was supposed to, telling me that this was in fact a scripted death, which did make me feel better. Didn't appreciate losing 22,000 fucking souls though. The room with all the weird tentacle enemies is kinda cool though. It gives the player a little mini objective in turning off the weird music to keep themselves safe, which is kind of a nice shakeup. I like how once the music starts, the snake men begin running for the hills as if they know what's about to happen, which kind of put me on edge when I realized that they were actually running past me and not towards me. I managed to get through the area though in a few tries, and I made my way towards the Crystal Cave after navigating the even more confusing second half of the archives. I actually like the Crystal Cave and its interesting level design. I was able to use my intuition to deduce that there were invisible floors. Too bad I wasn't brave enough to test my theory before a floor sign straight up told me about them. Regardless, it kind of saddens me just how short the Crystal Cave actually is, though. Seath is an interesting boss fight. My first attempt at the fight didn't really go very well, considering a clam somehow managed to get into the arena during the fight. Coming across a giant shiny crystal, and the fact that the boss came barreling towards me in a fit of rage told me that the crystal was probably important. So of course I do what I always do when I see a very important but also very shiny thing. I smash it to pieces. Seath didn't really like the fact that I did that, so I probably did something right. Seath is a boss that I actually hated at first, but grew to love over time. At first it felt like I had no room in this cramped arena to dodge any of its attacks, but over time I realized a good method of dealing with the boss is by repeatedly kiting it from one side of the arena to the other and getting in as many hits as possible whenever applicable. I did try to go for the tail cut as I had seen someone do it in a challenge video, but that turned out to be a pretty bad idea. It's not really my favorite boss, as it's more of a knowledge check than it is a skill check, which I suppose is pretty fitting for a boss like this. Apparently its attacks inflict a curse status effect, which I have never been afflicted by in any of my playthroughs, so that's a thing, I guess. It's at this point I went back to the wiki and looked up how many bosses were left in the game so I could clean up whatever remained. I discovered I was missing Crossbreed Priscilla and looked up how to find her. So I make my way back to the asylum and I grab this doll before beginning to snoop around the asylum to see if there was anything else that I may have missed here. I was about to head back to the bird to fly me back to Firelength when I remembered I could just warp to any location from the bonfire. Making my way back to the bonfire, I accidentally fall to the floor and into the hands of the stray demon. I legit did not remember seeing this guy on the boss list, so I had no clue what was going on. As for the boss fight itself, I don't have too much to say about it. I mean, I liked him better than the fire stage, but that's mostly due to the arena that you fight him in being easier than the other, but other than that, there's not really much to talk about. And with that distraction out of the way, I make my way into the painted world and began to explore it to its fullest. I really wanted to like this place, but I just can't bring myself to. It's such a cool place and such a neat idea, but I just didn't really have a fun time here. Being the last area I explored probably didn't help, as at this point I was getting pretty fatigued of the game. That and the moment I saw pinwheel skeletons in the sewer, I immediately wanted to dip out of this entire painting. I'm just gonna go ahead and skip right over to the boss. Priscilla is an interesting boss. The fact that you don't have to fight her is actually really nice, which I guess makes sense considering you can't leave this place without at least reaching her arena, considering the bonfire's warping functions don't really work here. Anyway, the boss fight itself is kinda neat, I suppose. Her turning invisible and you need to track her via her footsteps is a pretty neat touch. I don't really remember any of her attacks though, considering I beat her pretty quickly. It's a shame too. She's a very beautifully designed character. But with her down, it's finally time for the final fight. Kiln of the First Flame. I was expecting either a large, sprawling location in which the player would have to painstakingly explore every inch and fight tooth and nail to reach the final boss, or a straight shot to the boss with some small challenges on the way, and to be honest, I'm kinda glad it was the latter. The game had already been going on long enough, and I really wasn't feeling up to exploring yet another in depth location. That and the fact that it felt kinda nice. It felt like there wasn't anything else the game could throw at me. I overcame every challenge the game set up, and all it can do is throw a couple of Anor Londo knights at me in hopes of slowing me down. I do really like how each individual knight uses a different type of weapon. But with just a short trip down the Road of Ash, I made my way into the boss arena and approached Gwyn, and all I could feel was disappointment. Not because the boss was too easy, but because it was insanely difficult. Which is fine for a final boss, like, this is the final challenge after all, but nothing about fighting Gwyn felt right. All of his attacks came out insanely fast. Properly dodging them felt nearly impossible, and his attack combos were so long and oppressive that blocking them felt pointless as it just ate right through my stamina. Every mistake that I made may as well have been fatal, as being able to heal during this fight was basically impossible. The boss felt difficult, but not because I felt like I was challenged, but because it felt like the boss was designed in such a way that it overwhelms the player to an exaggerated degree. Now, I think I go into this again in the Dark Souls 2 section of this trilogy, but I wanted to mention it here really just to get my thoughts on the topic. I'm also mentioning it here as I didn't really feel like this component of FromSoft's boss design wasn't really all that relevant until now. Part of the reason why it feels impossible to heal during this boss fight is because Gwyn is programmed to read your inputs and will almost always attack you the moment you use an Estus Flask. I fucking hate bosses that read inputs. I think it's unfair to the player and it's overall a crutch in boss design. Why go through the effort of designing more intricate attack patterns or methods of responding to players' actions when you can just read what they do the frame they do it and immediately punish them for it? It's not real difficulty, it's artificial. Imagine playing rock, paper, scissors with someone who has the ability to read your mind. Seems pretty fucking unfair, doesn't it? One thing I've learned in game design is that many games are actually designed to be extremely difficult, but then artificially dumbed down to make them actually playable by a normal human being. A great example are shooter games. Enemy units in FPS games are programmed in such a way to almost always hit the player. Their accuracy is pinpoint, never faltering. But game developers will go out of their way to introduce a level of inaccuracy that can then be manipulated and moderated based on the selected difficulty levels. It's not that enemy units in an FPS are always stupid on an easy difficulty. It's that they're god tier enemies who are forced to play badly when an easier difficulty is selected. Now, this sort of game design does not necessarily align with the Soulsborne franchise. Enemies in these games will always have the same difficulty no matter what you do. The only thing that changes is your ability to learn and adapt to what enemies throw at you. Yes, you can grind levels and get more powerful, but the real growth in these games has always been mental growth. Learning attack patterns, understanding terrain, memorizing animation times, and so on and so forth. I feel input reading flies in the face of even this design philosophy. Yes, you can learn when and where it's safe to heal or dodge with enough practice, but it never feels like you're doing it because the boss was designed in such a way that you had to. It feels like you have to learn these things because the boss will cheat if you don't. And I think Gwyn epitomizes my argument here. Seeing as because of the fact that he reads your inputs, players have actually found a way to cheat back with one simple trick. You see, this boss can be parried. He's one of the few bosses in the entire game that can be parried. I tried to beat this boss legitimately dozens of times, but could never make any real progress. Most of the more difficult bosses in this game took maybe 30, 40-ish minutes to beat when including runbacks. Gwyn took over an hour and a half. I tried so hard to beat this boss in a fair manner, but eventually I got sick and tired of being fair. I caved and I looked up an easier method of fighting this boss before discovering that he can be parried. After that, 2 tries. One attempt to learn the parry timing, and one attempt to absolutely demolish the boss. Learning how to parry makes this boss absolutely trivial. Now, the reason I stopped mid-rant to discuss the method of beating this boss is because this is a similar method to how people use to cheese this boss. Because Gwyn can read your inputs and will respond with only a select few attacks when you heal, people abuse this to force out parry opportunities and kill the boss easily. This is the problem with this mechanic. By using it as a crutch and making the bosses artificially more difficult, you either make a boss feel so oppressive it becomes overly encumbering to learn, or you invite the opportunity for the player to kick the crutch out from underneath the boss and make it absolutely trivial. Okay, so I'm going to continue this rant here because I have actually no idea where else I'd put it, so sorry if it feels kind of out of nowhere, but I've been deliberating on this topic of input reading and heal punishing as a boss mechanic for quite a long time, actually. What I'm saying right now may seem a bit tonally different to what I was saying just a moment ago, but that's because I've rewritten this exact paragraph that I'm reading at least like 3 times, as my opinion has shifted the more I think about the topic of input reading. Now, ultimately, as much as I hate the idea of bosses reading player inputs, I think it's a necessary evil. To an extent. Now, regardless of whether that statement is actually true or not, it does not change the fact that I absolutely loathe heal punishing as a mechanic, and I honestly think it needs to just fucking die. Listen, when I fight a boss and I take damage, that is my punishment. When I walk along a path in Super Mario Bros. And I walk into a Koopa, what happens? I lose my power-up. That was my punishment. I failed to do what was asked of me by avoiding damage, and I got punished. This is almost a universally accepted fact in the gaming landscape. After I take damage, the Koopa doesn't proceed to hunt me down relentlessly while I struggle to find another power-up so I don't fucking die. And if it did, I guarantee nobody would let Nintendo get away with it. So why do we allow FromSoft to? And saying, well, Dark Souls is supposed to be hard, so it's okay, is an absolute dogshit response. Healing in FromSoft games are, for the most part, a finite resource. You cannot have an infinite amount of Estus. There are some other healing methods in these games, but those are not infinite either, and come with their own cost. The limited amount of healing you have is essentially like having a set amount of lives in a classical platformer. You are allowed to make this many mistakes before you must go back to a certain point in time. If you want to get further, get better at the game with the resources that you have. This is a classical game design philosophy, and heal punishing flies in the face of this concept. Some people may claim that they don't like being able to freely heal, and while that's fine as a personal preference, that doesn't automatically make for good game design. Game design is about give and take. In FromSoft games, the odds are almost always stacked against the player, but it is up to the player to overcome those odds. But there is a certain point where you have to stop putting more expectations on the player and throw them a bone on occasion to keep them motivated to keep going. By implementing a mechanic such as heal punishing, you are telling the player that not only are they not allowed to make mistakes, they are not allowed to try and fix them either. By forcing the player to restrict their ability to heal to a very specific circumstance, you are ultimately choking a player's freedom to approach a challenge in their own way. Now, while I personally believe heal punishing as a mechanic shouldn't exist anymore, I stated earlier that I thought input reading the player is still a necessary evil. Those two ideas seem like contradictory statements, so what do I mean by that? Rather than utilizing the input reading mechanic to immediately punish the player every chance that you get, what if bosses had more variety in their mechanics? If the player is healing, then maybe the boss can cast a spell or incantation or use some kind of item to buff itself or ready itself for another attack. Perhaps it can reposition to a more favorable location in preparation for an attack string or two. Or maybe more bosses can heal themselves, even just by a little bit. Bosses in FromSoft games would immediately transcend the big mindless health bar beast moniker so many of them carry if they just had more of a variety of moves that didn't just involve damage the player whenever possible, no matter what. Now, one aspect I love about Elden Ring bosses is the fact that there are certain spells or moves that they use which the player can eventually utilize themselves, making the bosses feel like they occur naturally in the world that they reside in. In fact, let's take this one step further. What if you had the ability to heal cancel? Like heal canceling being an intended mechanic that's built into the game. And before anyone says, heal canceling would allow players to be greedy at their healing. Firstly, eat a bag of dicks. Secondly, it is not inherently greedy for a player to try and stay alive in a game that is actively trying to kill them. Having self-preservation is not a bad thing, even in video games. And again, healing is finite in these games. But back on track. If heal canceling were a mechanic, it would also alleviate the issue of heal punishing as a mechanic, seeing as players would have the ability to mechanically respond to it. If you expand the amount of attacks a boss can use to heal punish, the player would have more opportunities to bait them out and punish with their own attacks. This method not only expands the complexity of bosses via a whole new branch of mechanics, but also elaborates on a player's agency when approaching bosses on their own terms. You are quite literally raising the skill ceiling when adding a mechanic like heal canceling. And you know what the best part is? It's not an abusable mechanic if bosses just aren't programmed to heal punish in the first place. Alright, my point is this. Even though I ultimately hate this mechanic and how it's used, I do think it can be expanded on to make some very interesting gameplay mechanics. Like how in Bloodborne, how you can avoid using healing items by dealing damage to an opponent immediately after taking a hit. Rather than just shutting someone down because they don't like a mechanic that you think is fine, why not open up a dialogue to see the ups and downs of existing mechanics and try to find new ways to not only improve it, but to help push the genre forward and make it more enjoyable for more gamers. Alright, a very, very long mini rant over. Regardless of all that, though, Gwyn was just overall a disappointing fight. You either kick his ass or he kicks yours. There was no real struggle or battle of wits here. You either know what to do and you beat the boss with little to no difficulty, or you get a flaming sword shoved right up your asshole. Gwyn has also single-handedly made me realize just how many of the fucking bosses I hated in my playthrough of Elden Ring. Although, I will say that this has made me want to replay Elden Ring from the beginning and try to apply what I've learned from here. Anyway, though, apparently there are two endings. One where you light the flame, and one where you just leave. I wasn't really aware of the second option, though, so I just went with the first. I ignited the flame and began another age of fire. And that was my playthrough of Dark Souls 1. I know this is kind of tonal whiplash considering I just spent the last few minutes bitching and moaning about the final boss and internal boss mechanics, but I fucking love this game. You may not have been able to tell though, considering some of my complaints or comments throughout the playthrough, but you'll also notice I mentioned a future playthrough that I've done a few times. Replaying this game a second time and knowing what all I needed to know in order to progress made playing through it significantly more enjoyable. Obviously, there was little to no wow factor left, but being able to apply what I learned and taking my turn and squeezing the game by its balls for a change made me enjoy my time with it immensely. The world in Dark Souls 1 felt so much smaller than I expected. Some people would look at that and say that's a bad thing, but I actually liked it. Not everything needs to be large and grandiose. By making the world smaller, it makes getting from point A to point B much smoother when traveling on foot, which you will be doing a lot of at the time. I do wish fast travel was unlocked a bit earlier, but I won't really even complain about the limited fast travel points, as again, the smaller world means you're never too far from whatever destination you want to go to. The smaller world also helps make things feel more connected. Some people like to define the Dark Souls games as Metroidvanias, and while I don't really agree with that statement at all, I do think that Dark Souls 1 and even Elden Ring to an extent gets closer to that definition than any of the other games of the series that I played. The fact that you can look out from certain vantage points and see a completely different location that you can also go to makes this world feel so alive and lived in. Like this is a place people could have actually thrived in. The graphical fidelity doesn't really help though, as despite the remastered edition being released in 2018, the entire game looks like an early PS3 or Xbox 360 game. I'm usually not big on modding games, nor am I really a graphics nut, but this is one I would consider modding for improved graphical fidelity. Unfortunately, though, I'm gonna have to end my time here with Dark Souls 1 and move on to the next game. There are so many things I didn't have time to mention. Yeah, for example, all of the NPCs. I did mention a few here and there, and when it was appropriate, but there were so many more NPCs that I met, and even many that I completely missed. Some were really nice, some were kinda standoffish, while others were just kinda funny. All in all, I love this game. I can safely say that it's now tied with Elden Ring as my favorite Soulsborne game. On May 9th at roughly 10 p.m., I completed the first game in the Dark Souls trilogy. Final in-game time, 37 hours, 34 minutes, and 26 seconds. Give or take a few hours for the new Game Plus footage I also had to collect. One game down, two to go.